Hello and welcome to the second pool. So here we have some names you'll almost certainly recognize, so a lot of regular competitors. So up first we have Exderp 7 up against Icemourn. So Exderp 7 is using a pretty standard shaped Terran ship. You can see he's got the containers in the middle, a factory on the back. No doubt that's just enough to rebuild that ship. Here we've got a Sentinel with two factories, which I can only really think is to give the symmetry. Otherwise, you know, the factory's 4x4, the armor's 2x2, so you could probably pull it off, but it looks like he's got the adapters padding each piece of armor section to 3x3. And doing that makes symmetry with a 4-wide factory difficult. Here we have a crystalline ship, but using exclusively missiles and an abundance of thrust. But the thrust is mostly forward, so I don't know if it's going to be able to keep distance or if it's going to try and crash into the target. But either way, crystalline ships are pretty durable. This here is a red ship that fires the nano drones, mostly, and also some of the red drones. This is a pretty bold choice here, bringing a red ship, but we'll see how it works out. It's mostly a support ship anyway. Over here for Icemourn we have a crystalline ship with the dual condensers, which as we saw in the first pool, the dual condensers does very well. Over here we have the plasma cannon, or a plasma cannon based Terran ship. It's got lasers that are undoubtedly on point defense, some autocannons and defense cannons, but I think the bulk of what we're going to see out of this thing is going to come from the lasers and the plasma cannons. It looks like it also has a fair number of torpedoes too. Here's a dual cannon Tinkerel. He's got a lot of shields on this thing. The little Tinkerel shields are... I've never really been able to get those to work particularly effectively, but maybe Icemourn knows something I don't. And here is a Sentinel ship, as evidenced by the Annihilators and Plasma Bolts. So let's see how this fight gets off. You can see the crystalline ship from Exderp 7 covering ground very quickly, but I don't know if that's necessarily a good idea. But we'll see. Exderp 7 is really good on orthodox factions and strategies, but Icemourn's off to a very strong start in run 1. Also, Duke Slayer, about the whole pool thing with Splinter, you guys were going to be in the same pool whether or not I did the first pool anyway. At this point, we are where you would have been normally in the pool. All of the newer submissions were received early. The pools are actually sorted by the order in which you were received. So you're all in the same pool because you all submitted your fleet in the last, like, day and a half. Well, we can see the Tinkerel ship trying to keep its distance, but those antimatter missiles from the crystalline ships will chase forever. Icemourn's off to a very strong start, though. Also, I'd like to mention one more little bit of information. Exderp 7 is a French competitor, and Deutsche Qualität is German? So I don't know. I think he's having an identity crisis over here. Either that or maybe he just has good taste. Who knows? Duke, you posted what early? I mean, the pool loader you can kind of abuse, but the earliest submissions fight the earliest submissions, and the latest submissions fight the latest submissions. So the more time you take to build your fleet, the more time your opponents will have had to build theirs as well. If you submit your fleet iteration early, like you did, Duke, and then change it, I move you to the bottom of the list, since you've taken more time to develop your fleet. So even though you were like the third fleet that I received, the most recent one that I received was today, and that pushed you to the bottom of the list. So if anybody's ever wondering why fleets are sorted in the pools the way they are, that's the reasoning. But this one is a special one. I gave all of the new competitors their own pool, but all the new competitors would have been in the first two pools anyway. And Icemourn takes the match. Well done. So up next we have Ruoichi Army against Ruoichi Senpai up against Exderp 7. Here we have a red ship firing an abundance of drones. It's got some lasers, but overall, again, a red ship in a tournament is a pretty bold move. Here we have a sentinel, a very small sentinel. I don't think it's going to have the durability to really hold on. It also seems to me that it has a lot more generators than it needs, but I may have missed something. Here we have a monogun tankful sniper with a lot of shields. I feel like that's a lot of budget that could have been put into something else. And here is, the fuck is this? Terran? Looks like antimatters, but it's bright and painful to look at. But let's see how these things work out. The recoil of the monogun sniper, as you can see, is having no problem pushing away from the enemy. But it is going to take a minute to get back into the fight now. That's those heavily overlapped Tinkerel shields seem to be helping a little bit, but the Sentinel guns are punching through pretty quickly. And yeah, those were antimatters in the really bright glowing ship. And Exderp 7 takes round 1. I believe both of these fleets are actually using red ships, which is very brave. Red ships are extraordinarily slow, flimsy. Their weapon selection isn't terrible, but they can't ever really seem to live long enough to actually use them. They do have the choice of both a medical beam turret and drone, which makes them the only faction that can repair itself in combat by launching med drones behind it and having it repair the ship in question. But at the same time, they die so fast that that's rarely a relevant tactic. But Exderp 7 takes round 2 as well. So moving along, we have Exderp 7 up against SNW35. Now, I really do like SNW35. He's got this little Terran support ship, but it's asymmetrical. And here we can see the little tail hanging off of it. As I mentioned before in SNW35's previous submission, that little tail is to move the center of gravity to help the ship behave. So if you're ever having a ship with a center of gravity that's not behaving the way you want it to, try throwing on a tail to move the center of gravity around, and it will change how the ship actually operates. Here it looks like we have... this looks like a B ship with the PD cannons, which that should be pretty terrifying. This here looks like a farmer with its big ass missiles, and here is Crystalline. So this may not be B. I don't know, those barrels are long to be Sentinel. Yeah, it looks like a B. Let's see what it actually does here. Yeah, that's a B ship. So, interesting of note, SNW-35 doesn't appear to have a Sentinel ship, which I want to say is a first for the tournament, and doing a very good job one way or the other. So, a pretty impressive first round. The plasma cannons out of that crystalline ship are going to be extremely dangerous. SNW-35 actually won the last tournament with a really solid fleet. Kind of came out of nowhere. But I'm expecting big things out of him in this one. You can see the antimatter support ship doing an excellent job of keeping distance. It can sometimes be hard to get a sniper to actually behave, and the fact that SNW's 35 sniper is doing as well as it is testament to the time and effort invested. And for bonus points, it's asymmetrical, which is always fun. And next up we have SkipperLB. I forgot to pause it. So here we have a Sentinel ship. You can tell by all the square guns, using a lot of flurry missiles. So, not sure how that's going to go, but we'll see. So I did a crystalline tournament a little while back, and this looks very similar to Skipper's crystalline submission. The overall aesthetic of it, it looks rather nice, and building a solid crystalline ship is very difficult. Here we have a pretty rank-and-file Skipper Terran ship. Armor for 18 uses a very similar style in his ships, but Skipper seems to be adding a bunch of extra waffling. I believe that's to shave weight and grab some extra speed. And here's a Tinkerel Dragonfly, looks like. The Dragonfly chassis was invented by Waste 47, and was a way of basically making farmers fast and mobile. But applying it to Tinkerel could have some very interesting effects. Let's see how it holds up. You can see the Tinkerel ship out of Skipper's very high rate of fire. I'm wondering if he's given up individual shot damage in order to be able to pull that off. What is it? So with Tinkerel guns, for anyone who's not terribly aware, the gun itself is just the little module in the back, and then you apply gun mods to it. And each gun mod has its own effects, but there's generally 4 of them. There's a damage mod that increases the damage per shot at the expense of costing more energy per well, everything makes it just cost more energy per shot. But the damage mod increases the damage per shot. The rate mod increases the rate of fire by quite a margin and only fits on the very end of the gun. The velocity mod increases rate of fire and projectile velocity, and the range mod increases range and projectile velocity. So you kind of, in this you're only allowed to have 15 Tinkerel generators per Tinkerel ship. So there's a very maximum amount of energy that you're allowed to generate, essentially. And as a result, you can only do so much damage with a single Tinkerel ship. And so the trade-off really kind of comes in with whether or not you do more damage per shot or you fire more. Because if you try to overbuild your guns, you're not going to be able to sustain fire on a target, which might be by design. For example, I call them the skirmish chassis, where their whole thing is they fire very quickly and it throws the ship backward. And it looks like Skipper might be using some similar idea there, firing extremely quickly to push the ship away. But that round goes pretty confidently to Skipper. So up next we have Icemourn up against Ruoichi Senpai. You see a good bit slower rate of fire than we were seeing out of Skipper's Tinkerel ship. you can actually see individual bullets. Icemourn's Tinkle ship doing a pretty good job of keeping on target, and the rest of the fleet doing a very good job of keeping the targets busy. One of the big problems with Tinkle ships is that they don't have much in the way of ability to absorb damage. So being able to throw a Crystalline, a Sentinel, and a Terran ship in front of the Tinkerel is going to give the Tinkerel the opportunity to actually do the damage that it wants to do. I think that was kind of what we saw there early on. And round 1 goes in favor of Icemourn. Bold move bringing a red ship to a tournament. But as we'll see time and time again, red ships explode themselves whenever you red ships explode themselves whenever you look at them funny. And for anybody who's just listening and not watching, Splinter's explaining some of the mechanics of how the gun mods actually stack. And you should, if you're trying to build a Tinkerel ship, you might want to take a look at that. And very useful information. But now we have Icemourn up against S&W 35. We saw S&W 35 do extremely well last time, and we're probably going to see more of that here. The large crystalline ship from S&W 35, of note, it looks like a spinner, but it isn't. It just kind of slides itself around. It doesn't actually spin at all. It doesn't really have anything preventing it from spinning, so if you were to crash into the crystalline ship, you would be able to get it to start spinning, and it would take a while to slow down. But it won't start spinning on its own. Meanwhile, that B ship, trucking it around the field, chasing down the Tinkerel. The B point defense stack will have no problem dealing with the flimsy little Tinkerel ship, as you just saw. Tinkerel really has a hard time if the enemy can actually catch up to them. And here we see S&W 35's support Terran holding on, keeping the Crystalline busy. And this is not the first time we've seen the hyperstacked PD cannons either. If you check the tournament archive on the NMSS.com site, if you check for Splinter's fleet B tier, I think the first B tier fleet actually took advantage of hyperstacked PD cannons, and I want to say that that was the first tournament where we saw hyperstacking at all. I think that was something Splinter conjured to make Bs work. Now, an interesting thing about the thruster arrangement on this B ship, you'll notice it spins, but it actually has very few thrusters on side angles like that. The bulk of its thrust is through the center so that it can move without spinning too fast. Also an important trick. But now we have Skipper against Icemourn. SkipperLB we saw do fairly well, but here we can see the very different rate of fire and projectile velocity out of those two Tinkerel ships. I feel if the Tinkerels were actually to fight each other, I suspect Skipper's would get the better of it, but Skipper's sniper was distracted and got itself cut to shreds. Hard targets are very difficult for high rate of fire Tinkerel to actually deal with. Here we can see the factory coming in very handy for Skipper, as he now has 2 of his Terran ships up. And those Terran ships are very solid out of Skipper's fleet. We've seen very similar designs in the past, and those plasma cannons are really good weapons to begin with. So the fact that he's able to build more of himself, and he's got the crystalline plasma condensers as well, there's a lot of damage on the field coming out of Skipper's fleet. And now it looks like they're through the armor blocks and they're going to be into some core segments here now. Which means that that Sentinel ship, despite as long as it was able to last, is probably not long for the world now. There's too much plasma coating the hull. And Skipper takes round 1. Icemourn off to a really strong start here in round 2 though, with well, he had a pretty solid point lead, but it looks like some real damage was dealt somewhere. I'm guessing to that Tinkle ship. Like I said before, I think Skipper's Tinkle ship is going to have a difficult time dealing with hard targets, which is all that's left on the field for Icemourn now. But that said, the rest of Icemourn's fleet seems to be very well adapted to it. Should still be more than capable. The generators for the proton cannons? All of his Terran ships are dead, so I can't really look. This Tinkle ship refuses to not be a pest, which is pretty interesting. Though that said, if you back up into the wrong target, you're always going to have a bad day. And we were asked about generators. We can see one big generator kind of in the middle of the cannons, and 2 smaller ones behind them. Yeah, I don't think he has enough power output, actually, to fire all of his guns sustained. After a few seconds, it starts staggering bullets, as though it ran out of power. It might be that math still dictated that keeping 6 guns instead of 5 with additional power was still the superior option. I don't really know. I only have very limited insight into what most of the designers were actually doing when they created their fleet. And this is basically what we saw in the first round. The Sentinel ship holding on for a little while, but ultimately this is over. And I'm inclined to agree with Splinter's name for it. The Dragon Tink is actually rather good at holding on. But I think a lot of that is just the Tinkerel shields are my favorite shields in the game. They've got very high recharge, solid durability. They absorb damage a lot better than most of the other shields. And on top of that, Tinkerel thrusters are all better at maneuvering than most, but SkipperLB takes the match. So up next we have Ruoichi Senpai up against S&W 35. S&W has just been kind of running away with it so far. And with a red ship on the field, I'm inclined to give the advantage in favor of S&W 35. I'm really glad to see the variety with the red ships on the field, but for pure effectiveness, there's a reason we don't see a whole lot of them. They tend to just kind of evaporate. And moving in around 2. I'd be surprised if this one went too terribly much different. That Tinkerel ship from Ruoichi does seem to put out quite a bit of damage, but it does seem to also struggle with mobility and maneuvering, keeping its gun on target. On top of that, that BPD kit ship is entirely too fast and able to close in on that Tinkerel ship. But there we have it. S&W takes the match. Next up, we have 4 Horsemen by SkipperLB up against Ruoichi Senpai. And again, I do appreciate seeing the red ships, but I feel like bringing a red ship to a not red fleet fight is a pretty good way to not do terribly well. Round 2, I imagine we're going to see very similar to round 1. Ruoichi Senpai's fleet seems to be fairly mobile, but not terribly durable, which is giving Skipper's Dragon Tank plenty of time and opportunity to do its job. I think we're going to see a stream of bullets here very shortly. Or perhaps not. SkipperLB takes the match. So last up we have S&W 35 up against SkipperLB. I think each of these fleets already has 3 wins. I don't know that either one is lost yet. Bit of a slugging match though between the Terran and Crystalline. Yeah, that is pretty interesting. S&W 35 has neither a Sentinel nor a Tinkerel. I was expecting most fleets to have both. And I suppose I'm still right, since I think he's the only one that doesn't have at least one of them. And I think most of the fleets we've gotten have a Sentinel and a Tinkerel. That said, S&W 35 is making a really solid showing here. However, it does appear that SkipperLB is going to get the better of him. And SkipperLB takes round 1. And yeah, in the final pool, I believe Icemourn was in this pool? I don't know, it gets difficult to remember. That's why I wrote everything down. I do actually like the look of this guy too. Really simple, but kind of actually almost looks like something people would build. SNW-35 doing a lot better this round than the previous. As you can see, he's already brought down 2 of SkipperLB's ships. Looks like we had some stickiness going on with a newly constructed ship. And all them B bullets. Point defense Bs are pretty dangerous. Yeah, Floof. Splinter had a suggestion that all of the first-time NMSS participants be in their own pool. So you are actually in the first pool. Your fleet has already done its subpool. Right now we're finishing the second pool, but we're about to get into the third pool. The third pool should be the brutal one. Some sort of hate pool, if you will. And yeah, this will go up on YouTube. If you keep an eye on the thread, you'll be pretty well informed. I don't know if you've subscribed yet on YouTube itself, but I'll be posting to the thread and the Discord as soon as it's done. And then we can see the melee spikes doing some work against that thick crystalline armor, but SNW-35's crystalline ship is just too grand for that. Where is his other ship even? Ah. So this Terran ship was actually constructed mid-match and appears to be keeping SNW-35's support ship busy. I think the support ship will take it eventually, just because SkipperLB's ship doesn't seem to want to turn. But looks like SNW-35 is going to take round 2 on points. Alright, so now coming in round 3. You can see the Dragon Tank and the Plasma ship or the Terran ship coming in and making a nice big hole in SNW-35's crystalline. If they can keep following that up, the manufactured Terran ship punching through the same hole, kinda. They're drifting a bit, which is going to give plenty of time for the crystalline ship to survive. And there they got it. So this is looking very solid for Skipper. He's already taken out 2 of the ships from SNW-35. He's only got the B and the Farmer. And that tanker is going to make very short work of the Farmer. And so now it's just the B left. And the B has to engage in pretty short range, which is about where most of Skipper's fleet wants to be anyway. So I'm feeling like this is going to be Skipper's match. And there you have it. Skipper and SNW-35 are moving on. Thank you for watching, and I hope you've been enjoying.